Our first stop is one of the most recognizable government buildings in the country, the Wisconsin State Capitol in Madison. It's a massive structure built from white granite, topped with the only granite dome in the United States, and home to the governor's office, the state Supreme Court, and the legislature. It's also, according to the people who work across the street from it, home to something else. A researcher who works near the building and who has spent years professionally investigating ghost stories for a living described his own encounter there during the summer of 1999. He'd gone to the state law library on the 3rd floor, finished his business, and stepped into an elevator to head back down. As the doors began to close, they suddenly stopped, reopened, and hesitated, as if someone had stuck an arm in to stop them. No one was there. He brushed it off. Old building, old elevator, no big deal. But less than an hour later, he was back in the building on a different errand, hurrying down a hallway near the legislative offices, and nearly collided with a short man in a mustard-colored polo shirt, glasses, and short brown hair. Moving quickly in the opposite direction, he apologized and kept walking. Moments later, at the end of the hallway, he glanced back across the open gallery toward the marble staircase and saw the same man, now 50 feet away, already turned around and waving at him with a strange, exaggerated grin. The math didn't work. At the speed the man had been moving, he should have already been long gone from that spot, not standing there waiting to be seen. The building has other older residents too. Custodians have long spoken of a bearded, white-haired figure in old-fashioned dress wandering the halls, believed to be a 19th century legislator and railroad lobbyist, whose portrait for years would mysteriously end up crooked no matter how many times it was straightened. Eventually, staff got tired of dealing with it and put the portrait away in a basement closet. The building's history gives that theory some room to breathe. This is actually the 3rd Capitol built on the same site. The first 2 both burned down. Before any of them existed, the hill was used by Native Americans for effigy mounds that were destroyed without a second thought during construction. And in 1882, while 2 new wings were being added to an earlier version of the building, one of them collapsed entirely, killing 8 construction workers on the spot. Even the building's more mundane history has an odd edge to it. In the earliest wooden capitol on this site, a legislator once kept pigs in the basement, and bored lawmakers would poke sticks through the floorboards just to hear them squeal during long sessions. Whatever is or isn't walking those halls today, it has no shortage of raw material to draw from. Our second building is over 160 years old, and it's had enough trouble keeping night staff that turnover alone has become part of its reputation. The old state capitol in Raleigh, North Carolina, has a long paper trail of watchmen who quit after their very first night, citing doors that open and close on their own and footsteps that follow them down otherwise empty corridors. One retired Capitol administrator recalled a specific spot on the 3rd floor near the old state library, where he'd feel a sudden cold, damp air settle onto his head and neck, cold enough that he'd decide whatever he came for could wait until morning. Not everyone quit, though. One security guard worked the building for 12 years before retiring, simply learning to shrug off the slamming doors and the footsteps behind him. And a Capitol historian has gone on record saying he makes a point of leaving the building before dark because he can feel the entire atmosphere of the place shift once the sun goes down. In one case, a staff member working late thought she could hear the murmur of a reception taking place downstairs, glasses, conversation, footsteps, only to reach the bottom of the stairs and find the entire rotunda completely empty, with the sound cutting off the instant she got there. The most striking evidence, though, came from a formal paranormal investigation conducted inside the Capitol in November 2002 by a psychic research group examining the building. The investigating team's biggest claim: they recorded what they describe as a spectral whisper and photographed what appears to be a figure in Reconstruction-era clothing, seated in the old house chamber, third chair, third row. What makes Raleigh's case stand out is how mundane most of the witnesses are. These aren't ghost hunters chasing a legend. They're payroll employees, security staff, and building administrators who had no particular interest in the paranormal before they took the job. Several of them only agreed to talk about what they'd experienced after realizing their coworkers had quietly been dealing with the exact same thing for years and simply hadn't brought it up. Our third case involves actual physical contact, not a shadow in the corner of someone's eye, but a collision. The city manager of Harrington, Delaware, has stated publicly that she walked directly into the ghost that said to move through the halls of the city hall after dark. She described the sensation as something like walking into a soft pillow, and was able to simply walk through it. In the same moment, she says she caught the reflection of a man, about 5'6" and solidly built, in the window glass beside her. She's not the only city employee with a story. Doors that are locked and confirmed shut have been seen swinging open on their own, then slamming closed again. Police officers working night shifts in the building have repeatedly reported hearing footsteps in another part of the building. And when they go to check, the footsteps have relocated to the exact area they just left. The city clerk has said she's seen the ghost on 3 separate occasions, including a gray, human-shaped form standing in the library that vanished the moment she got close. The building wasn't always a city hall. Constructed in the early 1900s, it originally served as a funeral home. The mortician who ran it took his own life in the building in February 1971, and longtime residents of Harrington say the description of the ghost matches the way he looked in life, just a little too well. Think about what that means for the building's layout. The room that's now the city library, where a gray figure has been seen standing and vanishing, may once have been a viewing room. The hallways where footsteps chase night shift officers from room to room were, decades earlier, walked by grieving families. A building doesn't always change what it's used for on the inside. Sometimes it just changes the sign out front. Our final case is short, specific, and happened in broad daylight. On a Friday morning in December 2000, the administrative assistant at Hatboro's Borough Hall, a building that started life as a school back in 1811, arrived at work early, confident she was the only person in the building. From her desk, she saw a tall man with a mustache and salt and pepper hair, pulled back into a ponytail, standing in the tax collector's office, roughly 15 feet away. He was dressed in a gray military-style uniform. Something about him immediately told her he wasn't a person who belonged there. As she watched, he crossed the room in 5 long strides and vanished at the far wall. She wasn't frightened, not exactly. When she later described the encounter, she said his expression looked sad or sick or tired, and that she found herself feeling sorry for him rather than afraid. Nobody at the Borough Hall has ever definitively matched him to a specific historical figure connected to the building. He simply appeared, crossed a room that had no exit where he vanished, and was gone. She wasn't the only one, either. The district justice whose courtroom sits on the building's second floor has said he's had his own moments in that building, evenings before arraignments when he'd feel, without seeing anything, that someone was standing behind him in an otherwise empty courtroom. Asked directly about his administrative assistant's story, he didn't dismiss it. He described her as one of the most credible, level-headed people on his staff, not someone inclined to invent a story for attention.